Hi everyone, I'm Luke, an expert Duolingo English Test teacher, and today we're going to talk about the speaking tasks. Specifically, the independent or the extended speaking task, where you have to talk about a topic for around 90 seconds. And you have to do this 3 times in the test. You also have to describe a picture. That's a different task, and if you want to find out more information about that, hit this card here. But this video is all about the extended speaking task, where you've got to talk about a topic for around 90 seconds. Usually the topics are pretty simple, things like work, study, music, art, etc. But being able to talk about one of these topics for 90 seconds fluently is quite challenging. So in today's video, I'm going to give you some top tips to help you with this task. But first, let's take a look at what you've got to do exactly. So these are the different types of speaking tasks you have to do in the Duolingo test. One task is describing a picture. I did a long video on how to do this well. Find the link in the description. Then you have 3 independent speaking tasks. 2 of these are introduced to you with written prompts, and 1 is with an oral prompt. Oral just means through listening. The written prompt looks like this. You have between 20 and 30 seconds to prepare, and you just click that Record Now button at the bottom when you're ready. It says that you should speak for at least 30 seconds about the questions below. And while that's true, I highly recommend that you speak for longer. So in this task, you actually have 90 seconds to answer this question, and like I mentioned, I strongly recommend that you speak for at least 80 seconds. Because at the end of the day, this is an English test where you're supposed to show off your English. So the more you talk, the more chance you have to use better vocabulary or advanced grammatical structures, both of which will help you with your overall score. So definitely keep this in mind. Try to speak for at least 80 seconds. So when you're here, after 30 seconds, this next box in the corner will light up, so you can click that as soon as you've finished. So that was the written prompt, but you also have an oral prompt. This is a lot harder. So what happens here is that you actually get given a question or a prompt through listening. So you have to listen and respond correctly to the question you hear. Of course, this tests both your listening and speaking skills. Again, for this task, you have 90 seconds to speak. And you can replay the question up to 3 times. So if you want to listen to it again, just click this speaker button. But remember, you only have 3 times to do this. And when you've answered the question fully, just click next and you can go on to the next question. So just to remind you, you have 3 extended speaking tasks in this test, 2 with a written prompt and 1 with an oral prompt. But the way you answer should be the same. The oral prompt is just there to test your listening skills and to check how well you respond to a listening question. Okay, so now let's take a look at my top tips for answering this task in the best way possible. Okay, my top tip number 1 is to answer the prompts. So on test day, when you're doing this task, you'll get a prompt like this. Talk about a book you recently read. This is the main topic. And then you'll have 4 questions to guide you through your answer. I highly recommend that you go through all of these questions, because talking for 90 seconds without these prompts can be very challenging. So you can just simply go question to question to question to question and answering them with lots of detail, and that should take you to 90 seconds. I've seen a lot of teachers talking about these prompts and how students should just ignore them and talk about their own story, but to be honest, I think it's much easier just to answer these questions. So I know that's a really simple tip, but sometimes the simple tips are the best. So be sure to answer those prompts. Tip number 2 is to remember to always answer the questions, but then expand on your answer. Again, remember that this is an English proficiency test, so you have to show off your English. So you shouldn't just answer the question in a simple way, you should answer and expand. So how can you expand? Well, you can elaborate, that means talk more about your answer. You can give your opinion, or you can give someone else's opinion, and you can also give some examples. So I know this is another simple tip, but you'd be surprised how many students just give a simple answer, and they think that's enough, but it's not. Remember, you always have to give a simple answer, but then expand on it. Because you want to show the examiner, or in this case the computer, that you're really good at English. So remember, answer and expand. Answer and expand. So let me show you an example. So let's say this is our topic. Talk about a book that you read recently. And the prompts are, what was the title? What was it about? How did you first hear of it? What did you like or dislike about it? So for the first question, what was the title? This is an example of how you can answer a simple question like this, but expand on your answer to show off your English. So this is my example. A book that I've read recently, which really inspired me, was called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, by the famous physicist Dr. Feynman. This book is a collection of personal stories, both hilarious and thought-provoking, from Dr. Feynman's life. So let's take a look at this. The question, what was the title, is a really simple question, and a very simple answer would just be, a book that I've read recently was called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. If I just stop there, I'm only answering the question, but I'm not elaborating. So as you can see in this example, all of the parts in green are the parts which I elaborated. Remember, elaborate means to give more information. So the parts that I elaborated, I said, which really inspired me. And then I added a little bit more detail about the book. So this is a very simple way to elaborate about this topic, the book. You can talk about the author, or about the genre of the book, and what were your reactions to the book. So this is a good way of expanding the simple question, what was the title? Now let's take a look at the second question, which is, what was it about? So this is also an example answer, and again I elaborated. So let me show you. This book is mainly about all the life lessons that Dr. Feynman learned in his amazing life. For instance, do things that you love as best as you can. As this book is a collection of stories from his life rather than a novel, it doesn't really have a plot. Each chapter covers one important part of his life, such as his time at university or the time when he met Albert Einstein, which, in my opinion, was the most fascinating chapter. So in this section, in order to elaborate, I gave examples. I said, for instance, do things that you love as best as you can. And at the bottom, I said, such as his time at university or the time when he met Albert Einstein. So here, such as provides examples to what I said earlier. Each chapter covers one important part of his life. So as you can see from these two, adding examples is a great and easy way to elaborate. Then the last part, which is in purple, is a way to elaborate by showing your opinion. There are lots of different phrases you can use to share your opinion. In my opinion is the simplest one, but you could also say, as far as I'm concerned, or in my point of view. These are just some examples. So I hope this showed you some good ways to expand on your simple answers. Now let's take a look at tip number 3, which is transition words. Using transition words will help your answer to sound more fluent and more coherent. And there are lots of different transition words you can use. If you want to move on to the next question, it's a good idea to use one of these transition words. You can say, okay, turn into the next question. Moving on to question 3. Or, as for question 3. These are simple and smooth ways to transition from question to question. You can also use these transition words when you are giving your answer. So you can signpost your ideas by saying first, second, third, or firstly, secondly, thirdly. When you want to give more information, you can say what's more, furthermore, or moreover. And when you're about to finish your answer, you can say finally. Also, if you forgot to mention something important, but would like to mention it at the end, you can say, one more thing I'd like to talk about is, and then talk about your idea. So remember, it's important to use transition words like these because it'll make your answer a lot more smooth and make your answer sound a lot more organized. So practice using these. Okay, moving on to my final tip, which is tip number 4. This tip is very useful, and it is to look out for question triggers. So what is a question trigger? Well, different questions have words which require a certain type of answer. So here are 6 common questions you might see on this speaking task on the Duolingo English test, and the words in green are the trigger. They are triggers because they should trigger a certain answer or a certain response. And that response usually has a specific grammar structure you should use. So let's take a look. The first one, how did you first hear of this book? So of course the word did is a past tense, so when you answer this question you have to respond using one of the past tenses. So the past simple, the past continuous, past perfect, used to. That one's quite straightforward. The next question, will you read a similar book? This one refers to the future. So again, you have to respond using one of the correct future tenses. Will, going to, the present continuous, the future perfect, or the future continuous. Be sure to use the correct tense for the idea that you are talking about. Now they get a little bit more tricky. So this question is quite common. How long have you been doing something? For this, you need to respond using the present perfect continuous. The present continuous is have plus been plus a verb with ing. And we use this to talk about an ongoing action that started in the past. So if a question says, how long have you been doing something? You should respond like this. I've been doing this for 3 years, 4 years, or whatever. But you have to respond using the correct tense. So pay attention to the question. 4 is particularly difficult and a lot of students lose points by answering this question wrong. This question is a hypothetical question. They usually come in the would form. So would you recommend this book? So to answer this correctly, you have to respond in a hypothetical way. So you could say something like, yes, I would recommend this book because I thought it was really inspiring. So if a question has would in it, you shouldn't answer using the simple past. So for this question, would you recommend the book to someone? You shouldn't say, yes, I did, or yes, I will. You should respond in a hypothetical way. For example, yes, I would recommend this book because I found it very interesting. Or, no, I don't think I would recommend this book because it wasn't very good. You could also use if sentences here too, because if sentences are hypothetical. So a simple answer would be, sure, if someone asked me about this book, I would recommend it. So definitely pay attention for the would questions. And the last 2 are opinion questions. For example, why questions, or what do you or what did you like or dislike about something? These questions expect you to share your opinion, so you should use opinion phrases like, in my opinion, from my point of view, as far as I'm concerned. Let's see how this is used in a real example. So let's use the same prompt as earlier. Talk about a book that you read recently. And we'll answer this question. How did you first hear of it? So I could say, turn into the next question. The first time I heard of this book was on a podcast where 2 people were talking about the most influential books that they've ever read. Even though I hadn't heard of Dr. Feynman then, the way they talked about him was amazing. So as soon as I finished listening to the podcast, I went straight out to the bookstore to buy the book. So as you can see here, the question, how did you first hear of it, required an answer using the past tense. But I started off by saying, turning to the next question. Remember, this was a transition word. This is a good way to move from one question to the next one. And then throughout my answer, I used the different past tenses. Heard is a simple past tense. Were talking about is the past continuous. Hadn't heard was the past perfect. And talked, finished, and went are the past simple. Definitely practice using all the different past tenses in a story like this because it'll help you get a higher score in grammatical accuracy and complexity. Okay, so those were some of my top tips for answering the 90-second extended speaking on the Duolingo English test. Just to remind you, they were answer the prompts, answer and expand, use transition words, and look out for question triggers. And now it's your turn. I'm going to give you a question prompt and 90 seconds to answer. This is a real question from the Duolingo English test. Definitely try to answer this question through speaking for 90 seconds, but if you want me to give you some feedback, write your answer below in the comments and I'll check. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. So how did you find that? 90 seconds is quite long, isn't it? But I hope my top tips helped you to answer this question fluently and with a lot more information in order to help you get a better score. Okay, and that's it from me today. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful and I'll see you next time. Take care.